Welcome to this quest. It all began on March 4, 1424, at least, according to the Nars calendar. That was the day the continent of Nars descended into madness. A torrent of fire and blood engulfed the land as the Great Stallion War erupted, one of the deadliest conflicts in history. Cities crumbled, lordoms fell, and the world turned to ash under the wrath of the demon lord. No army could stand against him. Hope itself had vanished, but in the heart of darkness, a spark flickered, a group of warriors, defiant against despair. This wasn't just a tale, it was the opening act of Paradise, the RPG that had captured the hearts of millions. Every evening, after the grind of a soul-crushing job, one man would dive into Paradise. Not just to play, but to live. Dungeon raids, bug exploits, lordom management, he knew every pixel, every mechanic. For 10 years, his gaming blog reigned supreme. But the reality outside the screen? Harsh, lonely, loveless. One day, the weight became too much. He died, burned out from overwork at just 34. No farewell, no funeral, or so he thought. He awoke, gasping, drenched in sweat. The room? Lavish, elegant, too clean to be a hospital. A maid stood beside him, startled by his sudden movement. "My lord," she whispered, "it was only a nightmare. You're safe." He blinked. She called him, "Lord?" Confused, he scanned the unfamiliar chamber. It felt real, tangible. His fingers trembled as he reached for the mirror, and what he saw nearly broke him. A bloated, pale face. A body wrecked by gluttony. This wasn't him, or was it? The memories came flooding back. His name was Shin Tae Pong, or had been. But now, he had awakened in the world of Paradise, reincarnated as Lord Jared, the notoriously pathetic monarch NPC known only for his title as a fourth-class magician. This wasn't a game anymore. It was real. That means I'll probably die again. But unlike before, Jared now held an incredible advantage. He knew this world. Its systems, its secrets, its future. He could change everything. No longer bound by his past life, he set his sights on a new goal: to become the greatest ruler Nasu had ever seen. Not through bloodlines or prophecy, but through strategy, knowledge, and pure will. Down the hall, the maid named Hayes hummed as she dusted the grand library. She was in high spirits today, unaware that her lord had completely changed. Suddenly, Jared burst in, sweating, panting, moving as fast as his rotund frame could manage. He frantically searched the room, drawers flying open. Hayes asked, "What exactly are you looking for?" Jared replied, "The keepsake my father left for me before he died. Why didn't I give it any thought when I put it away?" The maid, startled but composed, reached calmly into a chest and retrieved a pendant. "Oh, that? It's right here." He stopped, caught his breath, and nodded. "I'm glad I didn't lose it. Thanks for finding it." Her smile warmed the room. Hayes replied, "I'm glad that I could be helped by my lord. Is there anything I could help with?" He replied, "Nope, I'm going to step out a little bit." Something about him was different today. Kinder, sharper, alive. Alone once more, Jared studied the pendant, his father's heirloom. A magical artifact with deep ties to his family's legacy. In the game, Jared had never mastered true magic. Just a minor footnote in the story. But this was his chance to rewrite everything. And he knew what had to be done, even if it meant destroying his past. With resolve, he shattered the pendant. A rush of wind slammed against him. He could barely stay on his feet. Smoke, thick and brown, curled upward, twisting into a monstrous form cloaked in shadow. Red eyes pierced the gloom. From the depths of the void, it spoke. "Who dares summon me? Who disturbs my slumber?" Jared, once a forgotten NPC, now stood face to face with the unknown. Was this the first step toward saving the world? Or awakening something far worse? Only time and magic would tell. Jared stood frozen, eyes locked on the creature he had just summoned, Isabella, the one and only demon that could be called upon once in a lifetime. Her appearance shifted violently, her long dark hair whipping around her crimson, furious eyes. She moved toward Jared with eerie grace, towering over him. He was drenched in sweat, his heart pounding like a war drum. Isabella was not pleased. Disturbing her came with consequences, and she made that crystal clear. But Jared stood firm. "I want you," he declared, "to make me stronger." He knew her rules. Fear bored her. Doubt repelled her. Only those with courage and clarity of mind could gain her favor. This was his only shot. And he wasn't going to waste it. He didn't ask for strength. He didn't ask for power. He asked for the spiritual eye, an ancient ability that allowed its wielder to see into the hearts of others. Strengths, weaknesses, character alignment, loyalty, it revealed all. Only one character in the Paradise game had ever possessed it. Now, Jared wanted it for himself. Isabella laughed, her voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. A noble request, but magic like that always comes with a price. She leaned in closer, her grin twisted. So tell me, mortal, what is the most important thing in your life? Wealth? She'd take every coin. Fame? She'd chain him in disgrace. Family? She'd eat them alive. Jared's spine went cold. She was reading his thoughts, flipping through his memories like pages in a book. And then, her laughter stopped. Something strange was happening. Isabella's lips curled in confusion. She hesitated. Jared grinned. He had played her. He had hidden his most precious memory behind a wall of iron focus, his first kiss. Something so ridiculous, so embarrassingly trivial, that even a demon couldn't process it seriously. Isabella screamed as a magical pull dragged her toward him, like a vacuum swallowing shadow. He hated every second of it. A kiss with a demon was not how he imagined Brea lured that milestone. But it worked. The contract was sealed. He had the spiritual eye. And with it, he had a lordom to rebuild. Meanwhile, two maids wandered the palace halls, whispering to each other. Have you noticed? One asked. Our lord's different. He used to barely move, only came alive during meals. But now, he's going down to the basement? Their curiosity grew, especially for Hayes, the most loyal, overworked, and unappreciated maid in the entire castle. Her dedication was unmatched, even when Jared used to berate her for the smallest mistakes. And yet, every night, she cried quietly in her quarters, never once receiving thanks. Hayes rushed through the palace halls, arms full of royal documents Jared had requested. She found him waiting in the study, leaning on the desk like a man deep in thought. Stop at the door, he said gently. As she handed him the documents, she apologized. Jared's heart ached. He remembered the old him, his cruelty, his indifference, the weight he had dumped on her shoulders. And so, he did something unthinkable. He hugged her, not out of obligation, not to manipulate her, but sincerely. I'm sorry, he said, his voice low but firm. I hurt you. I used you. I never even said thank you. Tears streamed down Hayes' cheeks. She nodded. I can't stop crying and I've forgiven you. That's when the topic shifted to his weight. Hayes tried to warn him that a grass-only diet would ruin his health. But Jared was determined. I'm a fat pig, he declared proudly. Until I slim down, I'm eating nothing but vegetables. In Paradise, he knew exactly which cursed herbs accelerated weight loss. Merlin grass, which tasted like moldy soy paste dipped in spoiled milk, and aspa leaves, which made your breath smell like cheese left under an armpit. They were disgusting, but effective. Jared chewed them down anyway, because this time, he wasn't just playing a game. He was rewriting fate. From overworked gamer to reborn monarch, Jared had a long journey ahead. But now, he had vision. He had power. And, for the first time, he had people who believed in him. Back in the present, a red-haired young man with a half-empty bottle of liquor stood near the palace gates. It was New Year's Eve, and he hoped to crash the party. He found Hayes and another maid standing near the Lord's chamber. His face lit up. Hayes, he shouted, arms outstretched. But Hayes instinctively pulled away. He reeked of alcohol, and his touch made her flinch. She shut her eyes and tried to be polite, something Mr. Gragas never seemed to respect. Gragas smirked. Still too beautiful for a fat pig like Jared, he said with a sneer. Thankfully, Rakus entered, always the voice of reason. He immediately called out Gragas for his behavior. You've been warned about this before, Rakus said, glaring. But Gragas just laughed, brushing off the reprimand. He never took anything seriously. Their argument escalated, until Oben, the old steward with the graying hair, stepped in and commanded silence. The Lord is coming, he said sternly. This is no time for bickering. They all fell into an uneasy hush. Gragas rolled his eyes at Oben, muttering about the toothless old man, who was still clinging to power. Rakus burned with frustration. How had someone like Gragas been given such authority? The Lord entered. Everyone gathered around the grand table. Whispers buzzed through the air. Jared, once passive and ignored, now sat tall, scanning the room as he reviewed the latest reports. Something about him had changed. His double chin was gone. His eyes were sharper. There was a quiet, growing fire behind them. But Gragas didn't care. He slammed his bottle on the table and slurred, "Come on, Your Majesty. Enough of this. Let's drink. I've got something you'll love." He flashed another bottle and winked. Old tactics. Distractions. Rakus stepped forward, ready to shut him down, but Jared raised a hand. Jared pointed straight at Gragas. Why? He asked coolly, did you come here drunk? Silence. The room froze. Even Rakus was stunned. This wasn't the lord they remembered. Gragas stared, confused. Just days ago, they'd been Drinlord together. A magic missile destroyed Gragas' liquor. What happened to the Jared he could manipulate? Gragas's expression darkened. He raised his voice. I don't care if it's you, my lord. I won't forgive a person who uses magic against me. Instead, the fireball struck Gragas's back. He screamed in pain. Still, Jared wasn't done. He laid out the evidence, piece by damning piece. You used your position, he said, voice steady, to steal from merchants. To extort the people, to traffic human lives. Gasps filled the hall. Because of you, the lordom fell into poverty. People lost their faith in their lord, in me. Jared stepped forward. You disgraced your role. You disgraced the crown. Then, the final blow. You're fired. A stunned hush followed, then chaos. Some fell to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Jared didn't waver. Rakus, watching it all unfold, was in awe. Jared had dismantled one of the lordom's most corrupt men with a single, decisive strike. And then, without ceremony, Jared turned to Rakus. You, he said, you're the new chief of public safety. Rakus's eyes widened. He couldn't speak, but he bowed, heart pounding with pride. He would carry this honor with everything he had. Jared addressed the room again. Are there any objections? No one spoke. For the first time, they believed in their lord. But there was still much to fix. People were in the wrong jobs. The trade minister was a warrior. The agricultural director, a bard. Chaos. And then Jared saw her. Aubrey, watching him in disbelief. He had to fix it all. And with the spiritual eye now in his possession, he could fix it. A month passed. One evening, a battered merchant came to a small cottage, begging for money. Without it, he couldn't buy goods to trade. He was desperate, but the man inside coldly refused. Worse, he threatened him. I've been good to you, he sneered. Don't push your luck. Suddenly, the bell rang from their small pantry. No one had shown up in a while, so they hesitated, unsure of who should open the door. Finally, one of them crept over and peeked through the crack, only to see Lord Jared himself standing there, smiling and waving. The bandit froze, a little frightened by the sight of such a large man, but before he could react, he was met with a harsh punch to the chin. Behind the lord stood Rakus, ready and waiting to beat them to a pulp. Jared, still wearing a cheerful expression, calmly stated that this punch was for illegally extorting money from merchants and townsfolk. He then ordered all the criminals in the area to be captured immediately. Rakus, now the new head of public order, was thrilled to carry out the command. He began the trial on the spot. The two thugs realized too late that they had no way out. While the lord and his guards were busy with the culprits, another criminal tried to sneak away with a large sack on his shoulder. He moved quietly toward the exit, but Jared caught him just as he was about to slip out the door. The man dropped the sack and tried to flee, but Jared used his magic to stop him instantly. The watching crowd broke into applause rakis, praising both the lord and Rakus. People were relieved that the scammers had finally been caught. The armored knight shackled the three criminals. They had been evading capture for a long time, so everyone was grateful for the lord's involvement. Rakus then declared that Lord Jared had openly admitted to his past mistakes and vowed to prioritize his people's well-being. This capture was just the beginning of a new era. Jared's decisive actions proved he truly cared for the lordom. Bread was distributed across the streets for the hungry. At every corner, people praised Jared's decisions. Street musicians began playing cheerful tunes, and a new sun seemed to rise over Sivia. Not long after, Jared gathered everyone to reflect on what had been accomplished. The mood in the lordom noticeably shifted. People began to trust the leadership again. Jared now had admirers. He asked Rakus how he felt in his new role, and Rakus expressed genuine satisfaction. He finally held a position that suited his skills. As long as his soldiers were happy, he was too. Jared quietly sipped his tea while Rakus thanked him again for the opportunity. Jared hoped Rakus would lead his team for the long term. Statistics were promising, crime had dropped dramatically, and public sentiment improved daily. Jared personally selected elite soldiers for Rakus using the spiritual eye. All of them were now united under the Lord's banner. While Jared was growing stronger with this power, Isabella remained a looming threat. She was determined to reclaim the spiritual eye. Meanwhile, Oban's people developed a new method of cultivation focused on agriculture, but harsh winters hindered progress. Isabella tried to market the magic stone of Sivia as a major product, but without talented users, it wasn't effective. The spiritual eye still needed a skilled host, so Jared had to work even harder. As Jared sat with Rakis, the latter noticed Jared repeating a strange hand movement. Curious, he asked about it. Jared replied that it was a popular exercise from other countries, said to help with weight loss. Rakis chuckled and encouraged him to keep it up. Jared, after all, was beginning to look more like a true lord. But the move wasn't for dieting. It was actually a magic-enhancing technique. By channeling magic through both hands and redirecting it into the body, one could trigger a magical glitch that strengthened spells. Though the game world, Paradise, claimed it didn't use levels or yuan, Jared discovered otherwise. After a month of practicing the technique, he gained 12 levels. He could now use grade 4 magic more frequently. Just as Jared was quietly training, one of his soldiers rushed in with urgent news. The search party he had dispatched had finally discovered a gang of thieves hiding in a mine, and, to Jared's shock, they had also found slaves there. A year earlier, a young man and woman were sparring. Both highly skilled fighters, so focused on their duel they noticed nothing around them. Watching nearby was a blonde girl, mesmerized by their swordplay. But not everyone was impressed. Some onlookers questioned why she came so often, warning her that she might get in trouble. The girl, however, smiled brightly. She had no idea the older sibling would be there today. They warned her again that skipping duties would lead to punishment. She quickly grabbed some water barrels, knowing she could catch up. After all, she was the fastest among them. But her older sister wasn't thrilled. She had hoped to recruit Lena into the mercenary. Still, when Lena asked if she could ever become a powerful warrior, they looked at each other and replied honestly. The path was dangerous. Skill, determination, and willpower mattered most. Many women never made it. They gave up or died on the battlefield. But Lena had more talent than most, and if she stayed committed, she could achieve her dream. They reassured her that, no matter what, she could always return. This was her home, and her sister, now a commander, would hire her without hesitation. Lena was encouraged and ready to chase her future. However, just when she was about to start her new life at the castle, everything went wrong. Instead of a welcoming estate, she was thrown into a dark dungeon and shackled. Memories of Lena's first few months at the orphanage flooded her mind, times when the head of the orphanage seemed to adore her, calling her an angel sent from heaven. Her teacher had spoken warmly too, saying he hoped she would grow up to support and befriend everyone. Back then, she had been overjoyed, eager to belong. But those happy days had been a lie. In the end, it turned out the director had sold her off. He needed money, and buyers were willing to pay handsomely for such a sweet, innocent Lord girl. Lena had refused to believe it at first. She clung to the idea that this was all a mistake, that she had been sent to work as a maid for a wealthy family. But reality hit hard. This wasn't a noble estate, and she wasn't a maid. She was a slave, and no one in that household cared about her status as an orphan. The only difference was that slaves were expected to speak more politely, act more submissively, and disappear in the presence of their betters. She clutched her head in disbelief. Her heart refused to accept that this nightmare was real. She had truly believed the orphanage director was kind, that he would never do something like this. But the painful truth had revealed itself. It had already been a month since she was sold into slavery. She shared a cell with other unfortunate children. During that time, she endured physical abuse and lived most of her days in a dim, locked cell. There, she met another girl she could talk to, someone with red hair, who became her companion in suffering. When the girl learned where Lena came from, she said it was her destiny to end up here. Lena was confused. The red-haired girl explained that in the country of Majorca, most orphans were destined for slavery, because that was the law. The director of Lena's orphanage had agreed with this policy and had even signed off on it. The girl told Lena to stop dreaming of freedom. It was time to accept her reality. But Lena, only 14, refused to believe that. She clung to the hope that one day, no matter what, she would break free. Her new friend, who called herself Monty, had long since stopped believing in escape. She had accepted that they would likely die there, forgotten and in pain. Her words were cold and practical, dragging Lena's heart down, but Lena still refused to surrender. Over time, however, the two girls became close friends. Child slaves were treated like broken dolls in that place, stripped of freedom, treated like objects. Their captors preferred them obedient and hopeless. Ironically, because Lena and Monty were still young, they were considered valuable and wouldn't be sold until they turned 15. That gave them a small measure of safety, for now. A year passed. They adapted, to some extent, to the exhausting labor and the harsh life. Lena learned a lot from Monty, who had been here longer. She realized that Caribia, her homeland, was far more backward than she ever imagined. The Lord was untalented and passive, and the country was deteriorating by the month. Monty explained the grim realities of their world. It was a desert nation slowly rotting from within. One day, Lena noticed that Monty was burning with fever, barely conscious, trembling on the cold cell floor. Lena knelt beside her and pleaded with the guards for help. She swore she'd follow all their orders, never speak out again, if only they would give Monty something warm to eat. Maybe it was pity, or maybe the man just wanted her to shut up, but eventually, he gave in and handed her a small bowl of broth. Monty was so weak she couldn't even sit up straight. Lena helped her eat, Lemma make sure she was warm and as comfortable as possible. But then, the guard grabbed Lena by the arm. He claimed Monty had eaten on her own, and now he had business with Lena. He intended to take her out of the cell. Monty protested, but Lena tried to reassure her that everything would be okay. The man tilted Lena's face up toward his, smiling coldly. He muttered that the sick should be left in peace, but before he could drag her away, something hot splashed directly into his eyes. Monty had thrown the broth in his face. Grabbing Lena's hand, Monty shouted that now was the time to escape. They ran. Lena followed instinctively, not fully understanding what was happening. Just moments ago, they had been begging for soup, and now they were fleeing. But Monty knew Lena would never stop trying to escape. It was all she ever talked about. So she acted. Behind them, the guard recovered. Enraged, he pursued them with sword in hand, blood boiling, half of his face burned. He had already had enough of these two girls, and now they had defied him completely. Monty was struck down by the sword and was heavily injured. Lena, seeing Monty injured, cried heavily, seeing her friend injured. Monty tells Lena that she shouldn't give up. Just as he raised his weapon to strike them down, a voice thundered from the corridor. Flames exploded toward him, engulfing his entire body. It was Lord Jared, and he showed that guard what real fire felt like. This seemingly small mine had been one of Ched's true hideouts. Rakus asked Jared how he had discovered the hideout, and the Lord calmly explained that he had uncovered Gragas and the company's plan. They must have assumed that once Gragas vanished, the lazy Lord would make a small fuss, then let the matter drop within days. That's why they dared to hide here. With a smirk, Rakus asked if Jared knew of other criminal hideouts as well. But Jared replied firmly that he had already done more than enough, and shouldn't be pushed too far. Then, with commanding presence, the Lord turned and ordered his forces into the dungeon. Drawing his sword, he led his elite army, renowned for their strength and loyalty, deep into enemy territory. Their mission was clear: to destroy the operation that turned ordinary citizens into slaves. By royal decree, every mutilated prisoner would be freed, and those responsible would be punished without mercy. As they advanced, Jared ordered all hostages to be gathered in one location. The criminals resisted, launching an attack and calling for their leader to face the royal army. But the one sent to find Ched never returned, pierced from behind by a sword. Rakus was determined. He would not let a single criminal escape. However, the dungeon was vast and filled with branching tunnels. Unsure of which direction to go, Jared ordered the army to split up and search every passage. Luckily, the enemy's weapons were no better than those of common thieves, giving Cribia's army a decisive advantage. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Lena found herself in danger once more. A furious man grabbed her by the hair, ready to strike her down in vengeance. Just then, a voice rang out. Jared had found them. With a wave of fire magic, Jared forced the man back. As flames danced around him, the Lord stepped closer to the trembling girl, remembering all too well how many slave dens he'd uncovered in the past. But this was far worse in reality. He knelt before Lena, who was on her knees in despair, and gently asked if she was all right. She quietly nodded, saying she was fine, thankful that someone had come in time. But Lena's voice was hollow. Though she had survived, her friend Monty had not. Monty had died saving her, sacrificing herself without hesitation. Lena turned away to hide her tears. Jared knew there was no magic that could bring Monty back now. It was too late. He pulled Lena into an embrace as she wept uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the loss of the only friend she had. He could see how much she had suffered, thin, pale, with rough skin and empty eyes. While trying to comfort her, Jared heard footsteps echoing in the halls. Ched had arrived. As Ched entered and saw the Lord, his face twisted in rage. He hadn't expected Jared to come here in person. Surrounded by guards, the criminal sneered and mocked Jared, calling him a lazy glutton who'd rather feast than fight. Jared was infuriated. It stung to know that even low-life criminals saw him as weak and useless. He swore to himself that he would bring Ched to justice, personally. Ched laughed again, ridiculing the Lord and claiming that someone like him could never use magic. But as they locked eyes, Ched unleashed a bolt of lightning, intending to kill Jared and silence the intruders. Yet the strike missed, hitting the ground instead. To Ched's shock, Jared used speed magic, a rare and difficult elemental form. He began racing in circles around Ched, disorienting the drunken criminal. Ched, unsteady and confused, stumbled backward but tried to regain his focus. Knowing his opponent's overweight body might make sharp turns difficult, Ched gambled again, calling on stronger magic to end the fight. But his decision backfired horribly. Drunk and unable to control such a powerful spell, Ched's body twisted unnaturally, and his magic collapsed on itself. Exhausted, broken, and drained, Ched could no longer even summon anger. He fell. With his death, the war against the criminal mind network came to a close. Jared's missions were marked complete, the criminal ring was dismantled, trust in the Lord surged, and the loyalty of Krivia's people rose to 100, ushering in a lesser golden age. All accomplices in kidnapping and murder were sentenced to death. Former slaves were escorted back to their homes with royal guards ensuring their safety. Lena, now riding in a carriage beside Jared, asked in disbelief if she could truly go to his lordom. Smiling, the Lord nodded. Returning to Majorca would be dangerous, her old director might try to sell her again. Jared explained he always sought out promising young people and would be honored if Lena joined him. He offered her something more, an opportunity to become a first-class knight, something she had dreamed of since she was a child. Overwhelmed with joy, Lena promised to give her all and prove herself worthy. Jared silently marveled at the moment. He hadn't expected to meet Lena Jael Ellis here, the girl who, a decade later, would become the unbreakable tank of the Demon Lord's army, the one warriors called the Weeping Cheese, because her defense was impenetrable. Fortresses were considered lost causes if Lena stood at their gates. But Jared now had the chance to change that future. If he trained her right, she would never join the Demon Lord. Instead, she would rise as a beacon of hope within his own ranks. Yet danger still loomed. Their neighboring nation, Majorca, permitted illegal slave trading and violated countless civilized laws. Corruption ran deep. As night fell over Majorca, its leader, seated in a high-backed chair with a pipe in hand, brooded over Krivia's growing glory. He knew the captured criminal Gragas had once been his friend, and now that friend was gone. Krivia's lord had humiliated them, and so, plans for revenge began to take root. A quiet night in the lordom of Sarivia. It was supposed to be a quiet, peaceful night in the lordom of Sarivia. The palace guards stood watch, alert and ready to stop any trouble. But despite their vigilance, they missed a shadowy figure leaping silently across rooftops. Cloaked and hooded, the stranger reached their destination unnoticed, quietly surveying the area. After gathering the necessary information, he slipped away just as silently as he had arrived. Training at dawn. As morning broke, Jared began his day with an intense workout. Though exhausted and nearly seeing stars, he kept running. Lena trained alongside him, finding it easy to complete several large laps around the palace. Jared admired her strength but knew he had to push himself harder to achieve his dream of becoming a strong, fit lord. After their run, Jared asked Lena how she felt. She smiled, grateful to finally breathe clean air, so different from the cramped, dusty mines where she had once lived. Pleased, Jared suggested they continue training together until they could find her a teacher. Lena agreed, happy to have a new routine. A letter from Avila. Later, while they ate breakfast, Jared received a letter delivered by Hayes. It came from Lord Aubryn of Avila. Curious, Lena asked what it said. Jared explained that Lord Aubryn reported good progress in growing a crop called Retria, which could help reduce food imports. Additionally, Avila had attracted more monster hunters, boosting crystal sales and nearly doubling revenue since last month. Lena mentioned that she had heard of the Krivia region and had once feared its depths. But now, she admitted she liked living in Sarivia. Jared was glad to hear it. It was proof that things had truly improved since he became lord. A grim discovery. Their conversation was interrupted when Rakus entered the hall with urgent news. That morning, he had discovered something disturbing: the corpses of several monsters hidden around the castle grounds. Feeling responsible, Rakus apologized for the oversight, but Jared reassured him no citizens had been hurt, and that was what mattered most. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone from outside the lordom was involved. A cry for help. Just then, a child's voice rang out nearby. A young girl was begging for help, offering to sell everything she had to buy medicine for her sick mother. Jared approached her and asked for her name. The people nearby stared in awe. Few expected the Lord himself to intervene. The girl, Mia, explained that her mother had Renella's disease, and no pharmacy would sell her the medicine needed to cure it. Jared was deeply shaken. Renella's disease was serious, often caught in dungeons or from monsters in the lordom of Renella. It could only be treated by a priest's blessing or a rare medicine made in the country of Ethema. Jared asked Mia to take him to her mother at once. They arrived at a small, run-down home. Mia led him up the shaky stairs to the second floor, where her mother, Mary, lay weak in bed. Mary assumed Jared was a doctor and tried to send him away, saying she couldn't afford treatment. Jared assured her that she wouldn't have to pay, he was there to help. Mia chimed in, telling her mother that this wasn't a doctor but the Lord himself. Mary was shocked, but she recognized Jared. Years ago, she had worked as a cook in his palace. Realizing something must have gone wrong back then, Jared apologized sincerely. When she warned him about how contagious the disease was, he told her not to worry. He asked Mia to fetch a wet towel while he opened the window, and noticed something chilling. Outside, he saw the corpse of a monster, just like the ones found near the palace, lying beneath their house. Mary explained that she used to work for a group that harvested crystals from such beasts. Jared realized that Renella's disease wasn't spread from person to person, but rather through contact with these monsters. The illness had no early symptoms, made it nearly impossible to detect before it was too late. Jared acted fast. Hayes and Lena arrived with the rare medicines he had requested. He urged Mary to trust him, he would do everything he could to help. As he prepared the medicine, Mary, barely able to speak, asked him why someone like him would care so much about people like her. Jared revealed a piece of his past. Though he hadn't suffered from Renella's disease himself, he had grown up poor. His mother had died of terminal cancer because they couldn't afford treatment in time. He still blamed himself for her death, even after all these years. Jared saw his own pain reflected in Mia's eyes and vowed not to let her suffer the same fate. He would do whatever it took to save her mother. While Jared worked to save Mary, Rakus tracked down the person responsible for the monster corpses. A fierce battle broke out on the rooftops. Both fighters were skilled, but Rakus, relying on brute strength rather than agility, had to adapt quickly. The true enemy had finally revealed themselves. The rooftop duel. The battle could have ended quickly with a single well-aimed strike, but the criminal instead drew close and lightly touched Rakus, still holding his stance. The blow didn't faze Rakus at all. In fact, he scoffed, as Lord if that was truly all his opponent had. The weakness of the attack only made Rakus angrier. Someone this powerless had no right to threaten Sarivia. At that moment, the young assailant realized just how wrong his assumptions were. Rakus wasn't just a guard captain, he was far stronger than anyone had warned. Caught off guard, the boy leapt into the air to buy himself time, wondering how Rakus had gained such strength. The truth was simple: Rakus's power came from his unique ability, one that Jared could perceive with his spiritual eye. During combat, especially when upholding justice, Rakus could unlock his full potential, enhancing all of his physical attributes. Against such a force, the criminal never stood a chance. Landing once more on the rooftop, the would-be assassin now fully understood the danger. Rakus was merciless in battle and absolutely unbeatable under these conditions. Originally, the intruder's plan had been to kill his superior if captured, but now, he abandoned the thought. The thrill and danger of the encounter had been enough for one day. He turned to flee, muttering to Rakus that they'd meet again. Next time, he promised, the battle would only end when one of them fell in a pool of blood. Then, thick smoke engulfed the rooftop, and the enemy vanished. Rakus stood alone, frustrated that he had let his prey slip away. Back at Mia's home, Jared was finishing the treatment session while Mia watched him intently, full of hope. He demonstrated two types of mana, one created through simple imagination, and another through focused, disciplined concentration. Mia wondered aloud why anyone would bother with the harder method if the easier one worked. Jared explained, dark wizards often consumed nearby mana recklessly, and those who relied only on imagination became weak, unable to properly use magic at all. To Mia, the idea of a powerless mage was terrifying. Jared emphasized that mastering the difficult method was essential, even if it took more effort. Still curious, Mia asked why he wore such strange clothes and a fake mustache. Jared chuckled. It was part of the role he played as her magic mentor, helping create a magical atmosphere. But the lesson was cut short by a knock at the door. It was mealtime, and Mia was excited. Food sounded far better than more mana lessons. Mary entered the room, apologizing for interrupting. But Jared didn't mind, he was eager to try her coup lord. She wore her professional attire and was clearly feeling much better, no longer bedridden thanks to the medicine Jared had prepared. However, Jared was concerned. It was too soon for her to be on her feet and war lord again. Mary assured him she felt completely recovered and had wanted to show her gratitude by preparing a special breakfast for him. The main dish? Soy meat, Jared's favorite, and something he could eat every day without complaint. Suddenly, Isabella appeared, fashionably late, as always. She noticed right away that Jared had changed significantly. In her eyes, most people always sought the shortcut, like the glitchy training methods that promised rapid mana growth in just a day or two. Yet such fast tracks left mages without real skill or discipline. Jared, on the other hand, had chosen the harder path, and it showed. Suddenly, Isabella arrived, unexpected and, as usual, fashionably late. The moment she laid eyes on Jared, she paused. He had changed. There was something different, more refined, sharper. Everyone looks for shortcuts, she mused internally. And Jared had clearly found one. There was a method circulating among magicians, an unstable trick involving a bug in the training system that could increase a mage's mana by 2 or 3 points in a single day. Most who used it became over-reliant and lacked real combat skill. But Jared had done something else entirely. He had taken that method, stabilized it, merged it with traditional training, and shaped it with his personal mana control. The result? A powerful hybrid technique that boosted his magical strength by 6 full points. This technique needed a name, something symbolic. Solo bug player? Jared called it, a title reflecting his solo path in a world that didn't quite feel like his own. Isabella studied him carefully. Jared didn't operate by the usual rules. She asked him if he could perceive mana flows, currents of magic that normal people couldn't even sense. Jared hesitated, then shrugged it off, his mana level already proving he wasn't ordinary. But Isabella wasn't satisfied. She stepped closer, gently touching his shoulder. "You're not from this world, are you?" she asked quietly. Startled, Jared turned toward her, quickly denying it. But Isabella pressed further. Perhaps he was from the Eastern Empire, she speculated, a place whispered about in legends, said to be home to people with extraordinary absorption abilities. Jared deflected with a chuckle. Old myths, he said. But in truth, the Eastern Empire was more than myth to him. It was a region in paradise, the online game he had played obsessively. A game whose expansion he'd waited 5 years to experience, before dying and ending up here. Isabella noticed the change in his expression. "Strange things happen around you," she said, gently touching his arm again. "Let's speak honestly, you're the only one who can see and hear me." Jared sighed. "I'm not giving you the spiritual eye." "Fine," she replied with a teasing smile. "Then save it as a wedding gift." That caught him off guard. She laughed, then confessed. "I used to find you disgusting when you were fat. But now, you're surprisingly handsome." Jared flushed red, especially when she admitted she had been watching him sleep, from the ceiling, no less. She hovered beside him, whispering with a playful grin, "And don't forget, you gave me your first kiss in years." Mortified, Jared jumped up and bolted from the room, claiming he had urgent business in Ranella. Isabella, of course, insisted on coming along. During the carriage ride, Jared observed young Lena with growing admiration. She picked up sword mastery faster than most adult swordmen. At this rate, she'd outgrow his lessons in a month or 2. He needed to find her a proper mentor, and fast. As they rolled along, Hayes, seated beside him, handed over a letter from Arknaz addressed to the Lord. Jared read it. The letter said that Seravia's most talented warrior had only 1 month left until it moved to another place. It was time to act. Jared had a short list of trustworthy candidates in mind. But just then, the carriage window shattered. Jared sprang into action, conjuring a magic shield to protect Hayes. The first wave of arrows was weak and easy to deflect. But soon, the attack intensified, the shield began to crack. Hayes moved to shield him with her body, but Jared stopped her cold. "If you step outside, you'll die. Sit down." "I mean it." His voice carried a terrifying finality. Hayes sat back, wide-eyed. Isabella appeared, offering to help. Jared refused. "This is my fight." The attackers, realizing a mage was aboard, regrouped. Their leader, a hired assassin named Tog, stepped forward. Confident, he aimed to impress a newcomer in their ranks by finishing the job himself. As Tog drew closer, he raised his hand, ready to unleash a devastating spell. Jared wasn't intimidated. With the calm focus of a lord, he launched a burst of speed magic to confuse the assassin. But Tog only laughed. "Tricks," he sneered, summoning a crackling magic arrow. Jared conjured another shield, but the pressure kept growing. Tog was a mage killer, trained to counter spellcasters. Tog's eyes locked onto Jared's staff. With bloodlust and lunged forward. Jared was ready. He caught the attack, reversed the momentum, and struck with a spell that magnified his physical strength. Tog staggered, surprised at the sudden force. Then Jared uttered one word, paralysis. Tog froze. Every muscle locked. He couldn't move. Now at his mercy, the assassin stared up at Jared in desperation. Jared didn't expect much. Criminals like Tog rarely talked. But this time was different. "Spare me," Tog gasped. "I'll tell you everything, anything you want." Jared stepped forward, staff in one hand, a large hammer in the other. He listened, but he didn't trust. Criminals always spoke sweetly when their lives were on the line. Without hesitation, Jared raised the hammer high, and lunged forward, and brought it crashing down. Not far away, a young boy sat in a hidden cave near the bandit's lair. He listened to the clash outside, trembling. He remembered the old saying, "A traitor without gold can't buy luck." And luck had not favored him lately. He had overheard it all, how Tog and his gang had murdered 11 people in just the last 6 days. He wondered why no one had stopped them before. But maybe, someone could. From his hiding place, the boy watched as Jared rose into the sky and created a massive fire sphere. Tog was still frozen in place. The boy smiled for the first time in days. Jared had given him hope. Maybe this warrior would save him too. And Jared did. The boy clung to him tightly after being rescued, thanking him again and again. Jared, embarrassed, tried to pull away, but the boy wouldn't let go. The boy introduced himself as someone who had come here to make a deal for mana crystals but had been captured. Jared apologized for the lawlessness in the region. Jared suddenly recalled something from his past life, Arknaz, the most powerful NPC ruler from the East. He had built an empire using fashion foresight and market analysis, mastering trends. Jared was shocked to learn that this was that boy. He decided to help him further. Offering him 15% of the profits, Jared asked the boy to handle the medicine sales in Ranella. But Arknaz declined the offer. Instead, he made 2 requests. The first, simple, he asked Jared to call him Arknaz. Isabella, listening nearby, was speechless. Arknaz had turned down profit, just to be called by that name? Still, Jared agreed. They soon arrived in Ranella, and it was nothing like they had heard. The kingdom was full of life and trade, despite its struggles. Together, they began setting up their shop. Arknaz and Hayes carried boxes, filled with flyers and packaging. Jared prepared a barrel containing the precious medicine, but it wasn't quite finished. Turning a faucet, he filled a vial with a red liquid. With a click, it sealed shut, and a system message confirmed that his herb harnessing skill had reached level 2. Jared gave Arknaz a sample bottle to sell. Soon, their first customer approached. The man, Talon, had Ranella's disease. Arknaz smiled and told him the medicine was just 1 gold piece. Suspicious, Talon hesitated, but Arknaz's charm and Jared's confidence swayed him. Talon signed a contract, confused that it gave him full rights to the medicine. He drank it anyway. Jared assured him it would take 30 minutes to work, and promised to refund 1,000 gold if it failed. But before he could go away, Jared said that the medicinal effect of the medicine will take 30 minutes. He could go away now and rest. Tolan replied that he did buy the medicine since he trusts Arknaz, but if these medicine turn up to be a fraud. But before he could finish speaking, Jared replied that he will refund it for 1,000 gold and he will cut his wrist too. Convinced by Jared, the man prepared to go home. 2 hours passed. Jared wondered where Arknaz had gone. Then, a roar echoed in the distance. A massive crowd was charging toward them, with Arknaz at the front, leading them like a whirlwind. Hayes gasped. Could they really all be coming here? Yes. The crowd surged toward their stall, desperate for the cure. Hayes stepped protectively in front of Jared, but there was no stopping them. Everyone wanted to be first. The island was surrounded. The cure for Ronella's disease had become the most sought-after item in Ronella, and Jared's quiet shop had become the center of a kingdom's hope. It was absolute chaos, uncontrollable, yet thrilling. People buzzed with excitement, praising the miracle remedy. Siravia's status was rising quickly, gaining respect throughout the region. But, as always, with praise came criticism. Whispers of Siravia's dark past resurfaced, its grim reputation, its failed leadership. Some even called the king a fat pig, who had only recently decided to use his brain and enact change. That's when Arkness stepped in. He took control, raised his voice above the noise, and announced, "This medicine will only be sold here, only today. If you want more, come to Sarivia yourselves." He added that the nightmare forest of Sarivia was still largely untouched by hunters and full of monsters, an irresistible lure for adventurers. He also mentioned that in the kingdom of Sumitra, such a remedy would be rare and cost twice as much. By doing this, Arkness spurred even more interest. He made sure people formed lines and didn't push. "There's enough for everyone," he declared. By nightfall, the final jar was gone, and the crowd dispersed, satisfied. Exhausted, Hayes fell asleep like a log. Jared sat beneath the stars, overjoyed to count their earnings. 12,250 gold pieces. The equivalent of 12.2 billion in his past life's currency. It was enough to live in comfort for years. Suddenly, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Is the Lord pleased with the income?" Jared turned to see Arkness, who didn't look the least bit tired. He approached, holding a single coin in his hand. "I've come for my second reward," he said, referencing the deal they'd made. Jared hadn't mentioned the 2 wishes yet, but now he smiled. "Very well," he said. "What do you want?" Arkness took a deep breath. "I want to be your servant, and lead the Merchants' Union of Sarivia." Then he dropped to one knee, head bowed. Though only 20, Arkness promised to do his best to turn the Union into the strongest on the continent, if Jared would trust him. Jared admired Arkness's boldness. Despite being robbed by bandits and left with nothing, he hadn't given up. He smiled, saying, "I already considered you my vassal the first time I saw your potential. But the Merchants' Union, our trade hub, won't be handed out so easily." Arkness looked a little worried, though he'd expected that answer. Jared reassured him, "But you've earned your chance. Show me what you can do." Insight, drive, courage, Arkness had it all. Most importantly, he had luck. The position happened to be vacant. Jared liked Arkness. He could see the future of trade shining brightly under his leadership. Overcome with gratitude, Arkness thanked him deeply. Jared, now sleepy, excused himself and promised they'd return to Sarivia tomorrow. Truthfully, Jared was glad to be going back to the cold lands of his kingdom. As he walked under the starlit sky, a warm spring breeze brushed his face. Thanks to a bug in the herb mixing system, his crafting skill had reached level 35. With it came a new reward, knowledge of automated potion production. By investing 5,000 gold and 10 curvature crystals, he could produce 24 vials of medium concentration potion per day. At 39 gold each, that meant a 900 gold daily profit. Since the potions could only be bought in Sarivia, monster hunters had more reason than ever to venture into the nightmare forest. As they hunted and monsters dwindled, the number of valuable crystals would rise. Traders from other kingdoms began arriving, eager to profit from Siravia's new riches. Good things kept happening. Even Jared didn't expect the rapid success. The potions became the spark that ignited Siravia's recognition across the mainland. One day, Jared journeyed alone to a desolate, frozen place, completely empty of life. Isabella, ever watchful, followed him. She feared he'd come to end his life. After all, they weren't married yet. He looked healthier than ever, so he couldn't possibly be a ghost. But that wasn't his reason. He was hunting a monster, Duca, a powerful lich. When he told her this, Isabella panicked. "Don't say things like that," she scolded. "That monster will steal your soul." But Jared stayed calm. He knew Duca's tactics, his habits, everything. In Paradise, the game turned reality. Duca had once been released during the Great Sona War by the Demon King himself, gaining immortality. In the game, players had to confront him in the special campaign, Wrath of Duca. Once Duca became stronger, no sword or spell could harm him. Only divine power could end him. Isabella realized she couldn't stop Jared. He knew too much. Could he be a god in disguise? She voiced her suspicions. Stop with the nonsense, he snapped. You're driving me crazy. Eventually, he reached the Lich's lair. Remembering the in-game map, he searched for a hidden crevice. Isabella floated nearby, amused. He looked like a dog searching for a bone. He finally found the passage, through a wall. Isabella gasped. The secret doorway was one of the game's bugs, and it had worked in real life. It triggered a hidden map location, allowing him to approach Duca. They entered a chamber full of gold, jewels, and weapons, a treasure trove meant for an entire raid team. Among them were over 10 powerful artifacts. Jared approached a shelf and found what he was looking for, a ring that had belonged to a greedy man named Melt. As he slid it onto his finger, coins poured from the nearby jewelry like a flood. It was a spatial ring, one with seemingly unlimited storage. Isabella warned him not to anger Duca by stealing from him. I'm not stealing, Jared said. These were taken from Duca's victims. I'm returning the favor. They reached the Lich's inner sanctum. There sat Duca, chained to his throne. Once, a woman had drained his vital energy, binding him in place. He hadn't risen since. Now, he dreamed only of freedom and revenge. Jared approached. He could hear Duca's tormented muttering, vile thoughts brewing in the Lich's undead mind. You should reflect on your past, Jared said coldly. Then, without giving him a chance to react, he placed a hand on Duca's head. The Lich couldn't look him in the eyes. In that moment, Jared invoked holy fire, a flame capable of burning the undead to ashes in seconds. Jared wanted to be more than a ruler. He wanted to be the only true hero in this world. The one who would stand against the evil raging across the universe. The flames he unleashed revealed the Lich Duca's true form, a withered skeleton, wrapped in a smoldering black cloak that clung to his burning bones. The fire consumed him, but it did not extinguish. Through the crackling fire, Duca's voice crept out, low and rasping. How did you bypass all my traps? But there was no time to answer. The throne beneath Duca burned, the flames licking higher, and Jared quickly leapt back. Before him stood not just a monster, but a cursed magician, one who had sacrificed his humanity for power. A being who had long violated the laws of the world, and who knew no pity. Such magicians could create magical avatars, puppets of thought and dark energy that could act far from their true bodies. Duca had lost his core life essence to a sacred maiden, who had imprisoned his soul within his decaying corpse. If Jared killed him now, there would be no resurrection. He had to be careful. Duca's magic could drain the life force of anyone who came too close. Jared had faced him before, in the game Paradise. Now, it wasn't a game. It was real. This time, there were no second chances. From a safe distance, Jared summoned lightning arrows, flinging them toward Duca. In his prime, the Lich would have dodged them easily. But now he was weakened, nearly depleted. And Jared was no ordinary opponent. Duca suddenly tensed. He sensed something divine in Jared. Then he saw it. The ring of the Holy Maiden, once thought lost. It radiated divine fire, and Duca knew, if he wanted to live, he had to act fast. Despite his weakened state, Duca summoned the Knights of the Dark Dungeon. They rose from the ground, grinding bones and rusted armor, answering the Lich's silent call. Block his path, Duca ordered. Isabella, panicked, appeared beside Jared. There are too many evil spirits here, she warned. But Jared remembered the game mechanics. These knights had always appeared in areas with traps. Something was different now. He needed to stop Duca from casting high-level spells. He came up with a plan. I'll take the guards, Isabella said suddenly. With a flash, she dove into the skull of one of the undead knights. Its eerie gaze swept across the others, who paused, unsure. She controlled him from the inside. The knight's appearance was monstrous, but his body was strong, enough to disrupt the others. Duca noticed the disturbance and lashed out, hurling Isabella away. The knight's bones shattered, but she was unharmed. It was all Jared needed. With Duca distracted, Jared attacked, this time using the connected lightning. He charged the blade with explosive power, aiming to end it with a final blow. He reached for a nearby magic staff, overflowing with energy. But Duca had regained focus. He conjured a massive shield, encasing himself in a wall of force. Unfortunately for him, Jared's specialty was dual-casting magic, a rare and deadly skill. He unleashed 2 simultaneous attacks, overwhelming the Lich's defenses. In Paradise, Duca had always fallen to chain lightning. Jared infused his strike with the same spell. The magic bound Duca in chains, pinning him to his throne. Jared paused to catch his breath. Isabella, still inside the bones of the fallen knight, stared in awe at the scene. She knew without her, Jared might not have made it this far. Suddenly, Duca lurched violently. He screamed, flailing against his restraints. Without hesitation, Jared smashed his head, knocking him back down. Then he activated a divine ability Isabella had gifted him, one meant to exhaust, not kill. As Duca thrashed, Jared moved in and struck him with a supercharged punch. Duca shrieked. This was what death felt like. For the first time in centuries, the Lich felt fear. True fear. And he hated it, but he couldn't escape. The chains held him. Still, Duca refused to surrender. Roaring in rage, he summoned a terrifying new form, a storm of raw magical power. Face me again, coward, he bellowed. Jared rushed forward, summoning a defensive shield, but Duca's blast shattered it. The dark magic surged, nothing like ordinary spells. Jared stood exposed. Isabella, acting quickly, controlled the knight once more and blocked the fatal blow. Duca screamed in fury. He banished the knight with a single spell. The bones flew apart. Now Isabella could no longer help. But Jared remained unfazed. He was confident. He had studied this boss for years. Duca's strategies, weaknesses, and patterns were all etched into his memory. Jared moved fast, dodging every attack. The Lich was chained, heavy, and slow. He tried to crush Jared with his own body, but missed, again. Jared stopped for a moment. He trusted his intuition, his knowledge. Duca, however, mistook it for hesitation. Why was he only dodging? That's when Jared struck. He leapt forward and, holding the stolen magic staff, used fourth-class magic. He stabbed it into Duca's chest. Only then did Duca realize the truth. Jared had used low-level spells on purpose, to lull him into underestimating the threat. Confidence was Jared's greatest weapon. It was time for the final move. He activated the chain of the Holy Seal, wrapping Duca in divine energy. The Lich was completely bound. Jared placed a hand on his chest, channeling the full power of the divine flame. Duca struggled violently. Noise erupted from the walls as the lair itself began to collapse. Isabella hid behind Jared. Give up, Jared said. The Demon King you wait for, he will never come. Duca's magic weakened. His body slumped. He could no longer resist. But as he sank into the earth, pulled by unseen forces into his eternal prison, he hissed one final question. Are you sure you can handle what comes next? Jared looked down, unwavering. I'm only at fourth-class magic, he said calmly. There's still a long road ahead. And with that, the once feared Lich Duca was sealed away, forever. Jared stood silently as the flames of the defeated Lich Duca died out. The reason he had come here was simple: to defeat the most powerful monarch on the mainland. Duca had laughed at the idea, brushing it off as a child's game. Yet Jared's ambition burned brighter than any flame. He didn't just want victory. He wanted what no other knight, not even the great ones blessed by the deities, could achieve. Not even the Demon King had managed it. Jared wanted everything. Duca, as he faded into death, found himself intrigued. This young mage, with such fierce confidence and unshakable will, was he brilliant or reckless? The Lich resolved to watch him from hell itself, to see if Jared's ambition would become his undoing. Isabella, who had seen it all, shivered. There were moments when Jared frightened even her. His instinct for self-preservation seemed completely shut off, like he was ready to sacrifice everything. Many in this world were stronger than him, but Jared didn't care. It was as if he knew he'd eventually rise above them all. Once the ashes settled and the dungeon quieted, Jared approached a pedestal at the center of the chamber. He picked up the object he had come for, a large bracelet, an artifact of growth. It pulsed with potential, but then Isabella saw something else, something strange. A book, half buried beneath fallen debris. Jared, look at this, she said cautiously. The King of Sarivia walked over and picked it up. The leather binding was ancient, unfamiliar. He had never touched anything like this in all his studies of dark magic. As he flipped through its pages, a chill crept down his spine. It was a spellbook of resurrection. But this wasn't normal resurrection. The creature brought back wouldn't be free. It would become entirely subservient to the one who raised it, without resistance. Worse still, anyone who dared to break that bond would not simply die. They would be erased from existence, with no chance of return. Isabella read a few pages and recoiled in disgust. This isn't a gift, she said. It's slavery. Jared said nothing. You wouldn't use this on me, would you? She asked, half joking, half afraid. But Jared turned to her with a strange seriousness. "Tie me up," he said. "Use a curse." She blinked. "What?" He repeated it. "Use a curse. Bind me. I'll endure it." Isabella was stunned. For the first time, she looked at Jared and saw a flaw, a bit of madness, perhaps. But something in her twisted heart liked it. The boy added, "With each use, resistance increases. Eventually, I'll be immune to dark influence. It's better if we start now. I'd hire a proper sorcerer, but you'll do it for free." "You're insane," she muttered, shaking her head. "But, fine." Isabella paused, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Is that all you have to say to me?" "I'll think about the rest," Jared replied quietly. She sighed. "I'm tired of being a ghost anyway." Jared wasted no time. He had already found the body. As Isabella prepared herself, she hadn't expected things to move this fast. Moments later, she was reborn, alive, in a new body. At first, Jared regretted it. Carrying her around in this fragile new form was exhausting. She was clumsy, unsteady, and constantly complaining. And she insisted on being called Isabel now. Though her appearance had changed slightly, her personality remained the same, stubborn, sharp, and hot-tempered. She claimed she had forgotten her past life, but clearly, the attitude hadn't gone anywhere. "Walk faster," Isabel barked. "It's freezing." "You're the one who wanted a body," Jared muttered. "If you wore these clothes in this weather, you'd complain too," she snapped. "You're just as twisted as Duca." Despite everything, Jared found her oddly endearing. Her presence hadn't dulled. If anything, she'd become more emotional, more expressive. But she still knew how to distract him. Then, she noticed something else. "There are corpses everywhere," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Don't worry," Jared reassured her. "This is one of the trap zones I disarmed, back when you were still a demon." Eventually, they reached the corpse Jared had selected for the resurrection. Isabel looked at it with a strange expression. "Do you know how she died?" Jared shook his head. "No idea." She smiled faintly. "Good, I'm glad you don't." She didn't want to know. She just hoped the girl hadn't turned into an evil spirit, because being one was torture. "You felt nothing but cold and loneliness. No hunger, no warmth, just the void." As they made their way through the narrow stone passages, Isabel daydreamed. "Maybe this girl would have been happy to let me live for her. I'll eat all kinds of delicious food, dress beautifully, go on adventures." She looked at Jared with a mischievous grin. "And I guess I'm stuck with you. You're never boring, that's for sure, even if you are dangerous." Then she leaned against his back. For the first time in a long while, she felt content. Jared smiled to himself. He didn't say it aloud, but the feeling was mutual. He was glad to have a real partner at last. Across the continent, the number of active monster hunters had dropped drastically. The reason? The only cure for Ranella's disease, a terrifying affliction among adventurers, was found only in the kingdom of Sarivia. As a result, hunters were flocking there in droves. This exodus outraged Lord Horgus, ruler of a neighboring land. He was furious that his own kingdom was being drained of warriors, especially by a rival state. In response, he allocated a large sum of money to hire specialists and alchemists to reverse engineer the cure. But Sarivia was meticulous, paranoid, even about protecting the secret. They only managed to smuggle a single sample of the medicine. It wasn't nearly enough. The Lord of Ranella fury grew. He couldn't understand how his wards, the officials assigned to carry out these critical missions, were failing so miserably. With unrestrained rage, he threw open his office door and kicked one of them out, roaring, "If you can't even do this, you're useless." That unfortunate ward was the young, bold Jared. His absolute lack of fear, even before royalty, infuriated Horgus further. But Jared didn't respond with trembling submission. Instead, he left quietly, thinking of his own plan, a plan far beyond the king's understanding. Meanwhile in the neighboring kingdom Horgus raged and ranted. He ordered a new effort, to forge a diplomatic alliance with the powerful southern kingdom of Maorica. But everyone knew that this move risked war, and if war came, Horgus's forces would lose badly. One of the king's advisors assured him they still had 1,239 soldiers loyal enough to fight to the death. But Horgus knew this was not enough, not to crush Sarivia. Especially now that Jared had risen to power within that kingdom, possessing level 4 magic, a mark of terrifying capability. "If I had known this brat would grow into a threat," Horgus muttered, "I would have ordered Glass to kill him long ago." But Glass was gone, assassinated by a mercenary from the Master's Guild. The opportunity had passed. Just then, a tall figure entered the Great Hall. The man Horgus had waited months to see, the mage Akon, had finally returned. And he hadn't come alone. With him were several powerful magicians, all handpicked under Horgus's secret orders and funded at enormous cost. Horgus approached one of the cloaked men and asked, "What class are you?" "Third," the mage replied calmly. That meant one thing. If they attacked Sarivia now, the kingdom could be obliterated in a day. It was what Horgus had waited to hear. War now seemed inevitable. Meanwhile, far to the north, Jared and his retinue traveled through an ancient forest, untouched by most humans. Rumors had spread that Jared intended to establish diplomatic ties with neighboring nations. But when questioned, Jared denied these claims. "Our neighbors?" he had scoffed. "Majorca and Ranella? They argue over coin like rats." His true target wasn't a kingdom at all, but the tribes. Soon, word of Jared's destination began to spread. When it reached one of King Saravia's wards, the man nearly fell off his horse in shock. He had just seen a tribe of red goblins, aggressive, heavily armed, and anything but welcoming. Even Oben, a well-traveled veteran, was shocked. He had never heard of red goblins in these woods. Their party was soon surrounded. The red goblins formed a tight perimeter, and panic began to spread. The elder knights shouted for the younger ones to protect Jared at all costs. Rakis, the commander of the escort, gave a strict order: defend if necessary, but do not attack first. Tension rose, until the chieftain of the goblins stepped out. He was not what anyone expected. Calm, poised, and speaking fluent Nara, the goblin introduced himself as Iona, leader of the Red Goblin tribe. He welcomed the guests, intrigued by their presence. Aubrey, Jared's vassal companion, was stunned. A goblin that speaks Nara? But Jared stepped forward with a confident smile. "I am Jared of Sarivia. I came to meet you, Iona. I've heard much of your wisdom." Iona, curious, replied, "I knew your kingdom by name, but you look different than I imagined." Jared got straight to the point. He wished to establish trade relations, offering resources in exchange for iron and gold. To everyone's surprise, Iona agreed happily. Jared was the first human to ever offer such a deal in peace. But the Goblin King had one condition. "I want to know," Iona said, "can you accept our estate and our soul?" Before Jared could answer, a cart was wheeled in, loaded with nightmare stones, strange, iridescent rocks from the nightmare forest. The Sarivia knights were horrified. "These stones?" muttered Rakis. "They're worthless." Nightmare stones were beautiful, yes, but common, taken as souvenirs by novice hunters. To use them in a diplomatic exchange seemed like an insult. But Jared didn't flinch. He nodded and presented them formally. To everyone's amazement, Iona lit up with joy. "You brought us the nightmare stones. These are sacred to us." The red goblins erupted in celebration. They signed the treaty. In a moment, Jared had done what no army could. He united Sarivia with a powerful tribe. And it didn't stop there. Just as the party prepared to leave, another figure emerged. Aonb, Iona's second in command. "You can't leave just yet," he said. "A treaty means a celebration." More goblins appeared, but this time, they were joined by dark elves. Quiet, sharp-eyed, and powerful, they stepped out from the shadows. Their presence caused unease. Dark elves were known to be reclusive and hostile to outsiders, with them the Ibanina tribe. But Iona explained everything. The goblins, Ibanina and dark elves had signed a joint defense treaty years ago. Jared had just formed an alliance not with one tribe, but three. By nightfall, a grand feast was underway. Goblins and elves danced, drank, and cheered in unison. Jared sat beside Iona, grateful. "This knowledge, it saved us. If I hadn't known, we'd be dead." Later, Jared asked Rakis a question. "What do the current armies look like?" he asked. Rakis sighed. "No, sire. We lack resources, so we're focused on improving existing weapons." "Good," Jared said. "Send all the iron we received from the goblins to the forge. We'll make weapons, swords, arrows, armor." Rakis nodded. "Oh, and half the gold. Send it to the kingdom's army. Begin recruitment in Stad Ibina." As they spoke, Iona, who had traveled back with them, overheard the plans. Curious, he asked, "Are you preparing to go to war?" "With Majorca?" Jared hesitated. "Yes, I thought you might object." But Iona waved it off. "I support it. Majorca has become a haven for criminals. It's poisoning the continent." Jared exhaled, relieved. To end the evening, Iona raised his mug high and shouted, "To our newest glory of Sarivia Jared." Cheers rang out across the kingdom. Allies had been made, armies were being prepared, and in the shadows of the continent, whispers of war had begun to stir. After returning home, the capital was alive with activity. War preparations were in full swing. Among the palace staff and soldiers, a new presence had become both a curiosity and a source of awe: Isabel, Jared's former classmate from Desmond Academy. Though she was now bound by a royal contract and living under a new name, Isabel adapted with startling ease. Within 4 weeks, she had grown accustomed to her body and surroundings. Her confidence, intellect, and sarcasm were as sharp as ever. When questioned about her past, she simply replied, "I'm Jared's classmate. He used to be a real mess back at school." The servants didn't dare pry further. Isabel now trained alongside Jared, pushing him to his limits. Every session with her enhanced his magical capabilities. In less than a month, Jared advanced from a second stage mage to stage 3, something that would normally take a year under intense instruction. Isabel herself had already reached stage 2, her specialty being illusion magic, magic that taps into the fears and emotions of others. This branch of magic, notoriously difficult to master, allowed her to conjure enemies from a person's subconscious, forcing them to confront inner demons. Jared has given Isabel a candy and said this was an anniversary present. In his place there's a tradition where a guy was giving a present to a girl. Isabel replied, "Oh, how romantic, are you now warming up to me?" Jared said that he has given all single women in this manner. Isabel laughed and said, "You're too funny," while laughing. In Jared's office he started to write plans about his nurturing project. The plan was to find talented individuals in the future and recruit them on his side. There are a lot of reasons why Jared invested a lot into this project. Besides the acquisition and recruiting of talents was the reason given by the benefits of PRIST disciplinary system, which was a reward point to the teacher according to the student growth. Isabel showed the highest talent, while Lena followed all the tasks that were given to her, and Mia treated training as a game. But there was one more who sought to join. Hayes. He couldn't call Jared as a teacher and make a hesitant decision since she was a maid and has the lowest progress. Unlike a cleric, a healer is specialized on healing spells. It was a top class that has only 5 people all over the continent. In the living room, Jared says we're in a standstill. In order for Hayes to awaken as a healer, she must be one with the body and the mind. Oberon replied, "That will be hard since she walked the path as a maid for 23 years. Jared replied, thinking, "You're right, she must be pessimistic inside her mind, there must be something holding her back. I need to guide her on the right side." Oberon replied, "Sir, you have demonstrated your innovative ideas in the toughest situations and we're thankful for that. However, you don't need to do everything on your own." Hayes was giving her best. "I'm sure you could trust her a little." The next morning, the palace was in chaos. Jared had been attacked during a routine inspection of the outer training grounds. Hayes, who had been nearby, rushed to the scene. She arrived just in time to see him slump to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. "No, no," she screamed, dropping beside him. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, barely there. Hayes shook violently. How did this happen? A guard tried to pull her back, but she shoved him aside and pressed her hands over Jared's chest. Tears streamed down her face. The guard said that we have already called a doctor, but the doctor won't be here in time. No, I am a healer, indeed, to do this. Please bear with me, my lord. A soft glow flickered around her fingers. Then, suddenly, her body jolted as pure white gold energy surged from her palms. Light enveloped Jared's body, knitting torn flesh and purging the wound. 30 minutes later, Hayes cried and reprimanded them, saying, "You're terrible, although this was meant to help me, how could you do this?" Jared replied, "It was only a small cut and we used animal blood to exaggerate a little. Anyway, how does it feel to become a healer?" She replied, "It was terrible, and you too, even though it was a direct order from the Lord. How could you follow such a plan?" Oberon smiled and said, "This wasn't what I said when I told you to trust in her. The nurturing project is smooth sailing." While the project to educate the new generation of talent progressed smoothly, far to the north, Rakus was trudging through the snow-covered wilds of the nightmare forest. A blizzard raged around him, howling like a beast. The wind was so fierce it threatened to knock him off his feet with every step. Through the swirling white haze, he spotted a faint light flickering in the distance. Curious and wary, Rakus pushed forward. He hadn't expected to find anyone in this frozen wasteland, yet the light grew closer. At last, he reached a small wooden hut, half buried in snow. Standing in front of it was a bearded old man with sharp eyes and a calm presence. "Rakus," the man said, smiling. "You've grown." Rakus blinked, then returned the smile. "Mr. Olsen, it's been too long." Olsen ushered him inside, The warmth of the fire and a hot cup of tea thawed the ice from Reika's fingers. "You've changed," Olsen said, tossing another log onto the hearth. When the fire was blazing strong, Reika reached into his bag and pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a glowing red liquid. "Ranella's medicine," he said. "A gift from Lord Jared." Olsen raised his brows. "So it's real." "I've heard the stories." The medicine, whispered about across the continent, was a miracle for those trapped in the nightmare forest for long periods. Rumors had spread like wildfire, praising the concoction for its effectiveness. Olsen had doubted the tale. How did a fool of a lord manage to create something this brilliant? He asked. Reika looked up. He's not the same man he used to be. Olsen's eyes narrowed. He abandoned me once, and now he wants me back? I know, Reika said quietly. But he's changed. That's why I came. The kingdom needs you, now more than ever. Outside, the storm continued to howl, a reflection of the chaos brewing across the continent. The mainland of Nars was unraveling. Wars broke out like brush fires. Kings seized land, rulers fell, bloodlines, oaths, even divine favor could no longer guarantee survival. Heads rolled regardless of heritage. In this age, death rode a warhorse, fast and merciless, heading north. Meanwhile, back in the kingdom of Krivia, Jared sat in a tavern near the sea, nursing a mug of cold beer. The seafood here was cheap and fresh, a perk of the coastal setting. The frosty weather didn't bother him much, but Isabel wasn't a fan. It's too cold, she muttered. Nothing grows here. Jared chuckled. That's why I brought pesticides. We'll see if they work. Hazes, sitting nearby, smiled. They'll work. You made them yourself. She was right, and she also pointed out that everything in the region had been cleaned up. The roads, the buildings, even the docks gleamed. That was thanks to Arknes, who had promised to lead by example and keep everything spotless. The people believed in Jared. Some even said he alone had lifted Krivia from its knees. With medicine for Ranella's disease now widely available, and the kingdom offering full support to victims, the future was looking brighter. So much so that Jared was now being urged to expand Siravia's territory, to relocate the Hunters Guild headquarters here. A big decision, but perhaps a wise one. As Jared pondered the future, a loud voice broke his thoughts. "This beer is amazing." "Another round," shouted an older woman, raising her mug high. Jared's eyes widened when he saw her, Ella, the infamous sword warrior from the game Paradise. She was a mercenary, a brilliant fighter who helped the protagonist with nearly every major challenge, but always for a price. She was loud, brash, and powerful. And she was supposed to appear years later, not now, and certainly not here in the north. Sitting next to her was another woman, silent, composed. Chloe. She was known in the game as the Queen of Silence, and would one day become the Queen of the Dark Elves. A central figure in the final arc of Paradise, whose story was hidden by the developers to preserve the game's biggest twist. Jared stared. This isn't a coincidence. He stood up, heart-pounding, and crossed the tavern. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He walked up behind him, preparing to speak. But before he could say more than 2 words, Ella waved him off with a sneer. "Sorry, kid, I'm not into younger guys." Jared froze. That fast? She hadn't even given him a chance. As he turned, deflated, his foot slipped and he landed hard on the wooden floor. In a flash, Hazes rushed to his side, placing a hand gently under his head. "Could you be a little more respectful?" she snapped. "You're talking to a high-ranking noble of the Krivia kingdom." The room went silent, heads turned, whispers spread. "Lord Jared? Here?" Ella raised a brow. Even she was taken aback, but not for long. "You're not an ordinary maid," she said coldly to Hazes. "I'm a viscount as well. Do you think there's only one noble around the world?" Jared stood, dusting off his coat, and gently wrapped an arm around Hazes' shoulders, shielding her. "Could I bother you for something?" he said. "I'll pay you handsomely." Ella replied, "Well, this was an unexpected situation. I apologize for thinking you're a sleazebag making a move against me. Let's talk, but not in these place. So, 500 gold and a mansion and all we just did was to teach some kid?" Ella asked. Jared replied, "Yup, that the only down payment. Of course we need to write down and notarize the entire deal." Chloe said to Ella, "Teacher, I'll choose to follow you whatever you choose. After all, the human world doesn't differ from one place to another." Ella asked Jared, "Why do you trust me? It wasn't long since my pupil Chloe became my pupil. This was my first time traveling in the north. You don't know who we are?" Jared replied, "Of course I couldn't trust you yet, but money is the only thing that I could entice you to stay." He thinks as long as I pay they will help me, and aside from her personality she could never find a place called home. Later that night, long after the tavern had emptied, Jared sat in his quarters, still awake. Despite the late hour, he felt no fatigue, thanks to Gora's pendant, which suppressed exhaustion. His mind buzzed with thoughts of Rakus, Olsen, Ronella's medicine, Ella, Chloe, and everything yet to come. There was so much to remember, so much to record. He glanced at his journal, where he had started noting every important discovery, some of it even written in Korean, just in case someone tried to read it without permission. This was no longer just a game. This was a world of secrets, of shifting allegiances, and of destiny creeping ever closer. The next morning, Lena and Chloe trained together beneath the early sunlight. For Lena, it was grueling at first. Her muscles ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, and the frostbitten air cut through her lungs like glass. But she pressed on. She remembered the promise she made, to the bark, and more importantly, to herself. She would grow stronger, no matter the cost. It was a hellish workout, and Jared, watching from a distance, couldn't help but hope she didn't become an overly muscular, bloodthirsty monster if she kept improving at this rate. Chloe trained just as hard, but she moved with quiet precision and ease. She barely seemed tired at all. "Don't act so surprised," Ella scoffed from the sidelines. "The world's way too big for Lena to be the only talented brat in it. There are plenty more, some even stronger." She crossed her arms and glanced at Lena, who looked exhausted nearby. "Still, she's fast," Ella admitted, watching Lena dodge a magical projectile with near-perfect timing. "That's something." Apparently, whoever had trained Lena before hadn't been very good. Ella believed she could have killed most people in 5 seconds if she really wanted to, but she would give Lena at least 5 seconds of respect. Thanks to Jared's magical tools, 4 homing elemental spells hovered in the air, ready to strike. These enchanted orbs were perfect for training defensive techniques, especially shield usage. When asked how he'd come up with such a clever training system, Jared answered awkwardly, "It's a special method from the Eastern continent, tied to a certain system." The truth was more technical than magical. Using the same method repeatedly would cause diminishing returns due to the anti-macro learning safeguard in the world's hidden mechanics. But rotating through 4 different elemental spells, fire, ice, lightning, and wind, tricked the system into treating them separately. A loophole. Ella, however, had figured out Lena's condition without even using a spiritual eye. Jared was quietly impressed, but given Lena's pace, he wasn't worried. She was catching up quickly. Meanwhile, far from the training fields, Mr. Oberon returned to the kingdom after weeks away. The farmers and knights welcomed him back with open arms. The old steward had come to inspect the crop fields, and to his satisfaction, everything was thriving. Since the magical pesticides had wiped out the migrating pests, the farmland was thriving like never before. Interestingly, the pests had begun moving toward the neighboring kingdom of Ronella, and now their envious neighbors were desperate to learn Krivia's secret. The farmers expressed deep gratitude to Mr. Aubin and to their lord, Jared. To work in such fertile lands was a blessing, and when Aubin thanked each of them in return, many were moved to tears. These weren't just subjects, they were people who saw Jared not just as a king, but as their leader, their protector. With that moment of heartfelt recognition, Jared received a system notification. Achievement unlocked, sincere recognition. Plus 200 loyalty points. Bonus activated. Golden Age. Production-related abilities increased by 100% for 30 days. It was a turning point for Krivia. Fields bloomed, smithies roared, and towns bustled. Everywhere Jared looked, he saw progress, and he knew it was because of his leadership. For once, he allowed himself a proud, unguarded smile. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Jealous voices whispered beyond the borders, and shadows began to stir. That afternoon, a man arrived from the kingdom of Majorca, bowing deeply before Jared. "I bring a message from Lord Horgus of Majorca," he said. His name was Akron, and Jared greeted him warmly, inviting him into the palace to discuss matters of diplomacy. Their 2 kingdoms had never been particularly friendly, but Akron seemed to suggest otherwise. He praised Jared's decision to maintain contact and claimed Lord Horgus was very pleased. Jared forced a polite smile, though his mind raced with caution. Akron's tone felt patronizing, as if Majorca saw itself as superior. Rakus, standing silently beside Jared, caught on instantly. His stern expression and clenched jaw made it clear he wasn't happy with this guest. Eventually, Jared asked to see the letter Akron had brought. The envoy handed over an envelope, sealed with Horgus's crest. Jared opened it and read silently. Dear King Jared, after reflecting on our past, I realize I have underestimated you and your people. I wish for peace and harmony between our lands. Let us begin a new chapter, one of mutual respect and shared prosperity. Jared set the letter down, his hands trembling slightly, not from emotion, but from the rage boiling beneath his calm exterior. In truth, he longed for peace more than anyone, but he also recognized the arrogance woven between the lines. Still, he smiled. I'll send a collection of our kingdom's finest crystals as a sign of goodwill, he said warmly. Akron bowed, clearly satisfied. He had fulfilled his mission. That evening, Jared retreated into the woods with a bow and arrows, seeking peace in the quiet of the hunt. The sunset cast long shadows across the land, and he spotted a deer between the trees. One shot, clean and fast. A nearby warrior cheered, His Majesty is an expert marksman. Rakus joined him a few minutes later. Why are we being so submissive to these bastards? He asked quietly. Didn't we agree to distance ourselves from Majorca's influence? Jared didn't respond right away. He stared at the setting sun before speaking. Sometimes, we smile before we strike, he said. Let them lower their guard. The last blow is always the best, when they least expect it. Rakus nodded slowly. He understood, and now, he played along with the king's charade. A banquet was announced that night, celebrating Krivia's booming development. Food, drink, and laughter filled the halls. But Jared, even as he smiled, could feel the storm coming. He saw through Akron's polite mask. His spiritual eye revealed everything. The envoy was a spy, well-trained and deeply embedded. He would report everything back to Horgus. And once that happened, Majorca's army would march. Jared was ready. As the celebration wound down, Jared stepped outside, clutching his stomach. The alcohol churned inside him. Rakus rushed over, blaming himself for not training better care of the king. 1 month later, April 29, 1414 early morning. War drums sounded. The kingdom of Majorca raised its full army and began its march toward Krivia. Their soldiers were brimming with confidence, hunger in their eyes, and bloodlust in their hearts. They were ready to burn this once forgotten kingdom to the ground. They didn't know they were walking into the jaws of a trap. They didn't know who they had just declared war on. The entire castle was suspiciously quiet today. Lena noticed the silence and asked Chloe if she had seen where everyone had gone. Chloe didn't know, and didn't really care. Suddenly, Lena felt a chill behind her as her mentor, Ella, appeared without warning. I didn't give you permission to speak during training, Ella said sharply. Without further explanation, she gave Lena a punishment, 20 laps around the training ground. Lena immediately set off to complete her task, heart pounding. Ella already knew about Jared's intentions. What she couldn't understand was why he hadn't told her earlier about his plans to start a war. His silence baffled her. He wasn't thinking clearly if he thought he could keep something like this hidden. She couldn't just sit idly by while things escalated. Even if Jared didn't want her involved, she couldn't look the other way. Suddenly, something shot through the air, unexpected and fast, striking the warrior who had been stationed to watch the borders. The soldiers of Sarivia, caught off guard, made the decision to fall back. They needed to regroup and alert others. The enemy had destroyed one of Majorca's watchtowers, and it became clear that Sarivia had to redeploy its guards immediately, possibly even send in a special unit. But their lord disagreed. He thought it wasn't worth wasting time and manpower on such trifles. After all, he believed Jared only had a single battalion. If he'd known it would be this easy, he would have taken the territory long ago. The enemy soldiers stumbled upon a massive stockpile of alcohol hidden in the storerooms, enough to supply hundreds. The news lifted their spirits. To their leader, Jared seemed more and more worthless with every step forward. The soldiers of Majorca raised their swords high, rallying morale. This land, they believed, was rightfully theirs. Villagers, hearing the rising cries of soldiers, poured out of their homes. Yesterday everything had been fine. Today, war was at their doorstep. Jared was informed that the enemy had already broken through the fourth line of defense. Given their speed, they would arrive soon. Though Jared had made preparations, he hadn't expected such a fast advance. He had to accelerate the plan. He turned to Rakus, his most trusted man, someone he could count on in any situation. Holding the current position was critical. There would be no place to retreat if it fell. Rakus set off immediately to carry out Jared's orders. Just then, Hayes came running to Jared, out of breath and desperate. Why didn't you take me with you? She cried. I can help, I can heal people. But Jared shook his head. The battlefield was no place for her. Hayes's healing abilities were rare, perhaps even indispensable, but the front lines were too dangerous. One mistake, and she could be lost forever. And Jared couldn't bear that risk. Tears welled in Hayes's eyes. She wanted to serve her kingdom. She wanted to help him. But Jared had known her since childhood, since the day she arrived at the palace. She meant more to him than she could imagine. As he held her hand, a memory flashed in her mind. Jared helping her up for the first time, their eyes meeting in mutual trust. She needed to trust him now. As they stood there, Isabel appeared behind Hayes and gently pulled her back. "You'll do more good helping the wounded," Isabel said. "And I'll make sure you're kept safe." Reluctantly, Hayes nodded, and the two parted ways. Everything was in motion now. Positions secured, orders given. The time had come to make the enemy pay. The soldiers had found an ideal defensive position, but their numbers were low, only 300 men. Many were talented, but still far too few to face the overwhelming force before them. 100 of them were mere farmers, unequipped and untrained. Rakus stood at the head of the army, his mind heavy with doubts. They were asking civilians to risk their lives simply because they lacked soldiers. Yet, when the call to arms was made, these people had responded willingly. Jared had only wanted peace with Majorca. He had even offered a truce. But despite all efforts, the enemy continued its advance. Now, 1,200 trained soldiers from Majorca, fully equipped, were heading toward them. Those too afraid to fight were not judged. Rakus remembered a time when people told him to abandon Sarivia, when Jared was seen as a fool, unworthy of the crown. He had been cast out, jobless and cold. Yet even then, he refused to leave. His loyalty never wavered. Some had said the kingdom would not survive the coming winter, that its people would freeze and die. But those words didn't sway him. If the kingdom fell to the frost, he would fall with it. Now, as he returned to the present, he heard angry voices. People were rising. No one had the right to speak ill of Sarivia. It was their land, built by their hands and defended with their hearts. These people were ready to fight, even with their bare fists. Rakus was moved. Their courage ignited a fire in him. He ordered that armor and weapons be distributed to every willing fighter. Suddenly, a soldier burst through the barricades. "The enemy is approaching," he shouted breathlessly. Rakus scanned the horizon. In the distance, dark shapes moved. What they had been preparing for had finally arrived. But something was wrong. It wasn't Majorca's forces. It was Lord Ranella's troops, storming toward the kingdom with deadly intent. Two enemy armies now loomed on the horizon, Majorca and Ranella, united by a common purpose, to burn Sarivia to the ground. And leading them, Lord Ranella himself, riding ahead of his soldiers with a wild grin. "I can already see the borders of the kingdom," he shouted. The goal was close. Just a month ago, the kingdoms had argued bitterly about war, each blaming the other. But beneath the surface, they shared the same goal, peace, and perhaps, mutual benefit. At least, that was what they told their people. Now, Lord Ranella and Horgus sat across from each other at a long wooden table. The mood was tense, the air thick with silent calculations. Ranella wasn't entirely indifferent to the state of things, but his resentment toward Sarivia was not deeply rooted either. It was political, not personal. Horgus leaned forward. "Is it true," he asked directly, "that the ruler of Ranella recently received tribute from Sarivia?" Ranella nodded. "Yes, they sent us provisions. A large amount, grain, gold, supplies. An attempt to maintain friendly relations." This answer only irritated Horgus further. It was a clever, calculated move from Jared, too clever. Horgus tried to persuade Ranella to think more critically. It was strange that Jared, who had been silent for so long, was now suddenly playing nice. "It didn't sit right. The number of their hunters is decreasing," Horgus noted. "And it keeps dropping." He was convinced Jared was acting out of fear. Saravia's borders were expanding, but they were still not prepared for open conflict. That's why Jared was trying to buy peace, stalling for time. Horgus had studied Sarivia inside and out. He knew they had barely 300 soldiers. Ranella raised his eyebrows in surprise at that number, but it only strengthened their theory. Jared was hoping gold would keep the wolves at bay. They both agreed. If Sarivia was desperate enough to offer tribute, they might offer even more if pressed. So, instead of attacking immediately, they decided to wait. They would pretend to accept the peace and gather their strength. When the time was right, they would crush Sarivia together. To formalize this plan, Horgus sent Akon, a scouting mage, under the pretense of goodwill. It was a trap within a trap. When the kingdoms publicly declared themselves allies, Ranella nearly spilled his wine. But it was already set in motion. 1 month of preparation, then a surprise assault. The alliance was formed. Though their kingdoms had nothing in common, they had one shared enemy, Jared. First, they would eliminate him. Then, they would turn on each other if needed. Ranella laughed bitterly. Jared won't even see it coming. By the time he learns what we've done, it will be far too late. Siravia's rash decisions, Ranella said, would shorten Jared's life by many years. No matter how hard he fought, he couldn't stop this. As they spoke, Horgus's army had already surrounded most of Sirivia, exploiting a weakness in Jared's defenses. Foolishly, Jared had placed all his manpower at the front, leaving the bypass routes lightly guarded. Ranella stood and shouted, "Ignorance is a sin. Let Jared say goodbye to his land. Soon, it will pass into our bloodstained hands." Ranella then added, "If they come begging for mercy, I might be kind enough not to destroy them completely." But just then, the boy who had been standing at the front, dressed like Jared, his posture identical, removed his helmet slowly. It wasn't Jared. The enemy spy watching from nearby paled. He had been fooled. This wasn't their target at all. It was a trap. Realizing he had to report back immediately, the spy turned to run, only to be intercepted by Siravia's soldiers. He never made it back. The soldier who caught him muttered, "If a man responsible for public order and healthcare is this shaken, what are we supposed to feel?" Another soldier pointed at the spy. "He's the one who helped Ranella's army enter our lands. He's the one who gave them a way in." The knight beside him clenched his fists. "Wow, there is really a spy. And there's only one way to pay for that." The spy's eyes widened. They knew. They had known all along. The spy's end came swiftly. A few days earlier, Jared and Rachis had discussed this very scenario, how and where the enemies might strike. Jared was confident they would take the main road where their front line was most visible. But Rachis had other ideas. "I believe," Rachis had said, "they'll try a bypass route. It's the smarter move, easier to ambush us." Jared agreed. The hill terrain around Sirivia gave them an advantage, one Ranella and Horgus were surely aware of. Horgus had, in fact, discovered that bypass, and it became his plan. Jared had predicted this, and because their spy posed as a lumberjack, he would already know the terrain perfectly. So Jared laid a trap there. Now, standing beside Rachis, Jared held a magical landmine in his hands, a device he had designed himself. It triggered an explosion through magical overload, powerful enough to rival a fourth-class mage's spell. Rachis watched in awe. He had never seen such a device. Jared said, "Stand behind me and I'll pull it." Jared pulled the cord. A magical signal surged forward toward a stump on the bypass road. The device embedded there began to glow, then exploded. The ground shook. The explosion tore apart the landscape, leaving a massive crater and sending magical debris flying in all directions. Jared instantly cast a protective barrier to shield them both. Rachis was stunned. The sheer destructive force was unlike anything he'd seen. "And Jared?" He simply said, "Now let's see how many soldiers they're willing to send through that road." The enemy armies of Majorca had chosen this path, the wrong path. And it would be their last. They were marching straight into a death trap, and none would leave it alive. At the front rode Horgus, proud and eager. From atop his horse, he bellowed, "Slay all who resist. Burn down everything in our way. Chain those who surrender." His voice rose above the noise of marching boots and clanking armor. "Today marks the beginning of our massacre." The soldiers cheered, thrusting their weapons skyward, and not far from him, hidden in the brush, Jared watched silently. The strings were already in his hands. Akron tells the mages to start the defensive spell. With calm precision, Jared pulled the ropes that sent magical signals to the mines. They had been planted one after the other beneath the road, meticulously placed, impossible to detect. And now, they would erupt in a synchronized explosion that would leave nothing standing. Horgus saw his horses hesitate, then panic. Too late. The earth trembled. The mines detonated. The first wave of soldiers was engulfed in flames and shards of magical energy. The screams came quickly, terribly. Men burned alive, torn apart. Horses shrieked and reared, chaos spreading in all directions. The three mages raced to the center of the road, casting a powerful magical barrier to protect the survivors. But it was too late for most. Half the army had already perished. Farther away, Ranella heard the explosion from his position and spun around, stunned. So this was Jared's plan all along. Ronell now realized with horror that they were the ones at a disadvantage, not Sarivia. Despite its small army of 300 men, Sarivia held the high ground, the traps, and the strategy. Even without Majorca's support, Ronell still commanded 800 soldiers. He wasn't going to stop. He roared, "Turn all who resist into dust. Submit or perish." From the defense lines, Rakus raised his shields. The soldiers followed, preparing to strike back with whatever strength they had. Back on the ravaged road, Akron staggered, disoriented. Removing his shield, he looked around and found Horgus. "Are you all right?" The Lord was alive, barely touched, but shaken. "Report," he barked. The news was devastating. All were dead, except for the 500 troops who hadn't yet reached the explosion zone. The rest, gone. Horgus stared at the burning flag of his kingdom, lying torn and scorched in the dirt. His lips trembled. "And the mages?" he asked. Akron's voice was grim. "Isaac and Odium are gone." It was a catastrophic loss. The men Horgus had counted on to lead the invasion were all dead. The great war he envisioned was now a smoldering ruin. How could someone like Jared, so young, so underestimated, possess such terrible weapons? How had he destroyed so many lives in one blow? Now Horgus had only Akron. He turned to him with wide, desperate eyes. "You must not leave my side, ever again." But before the Lord could think of a new plan, disaster struck again. From the shadows, Jared appeared, a blur of rage and vengeance, and rushed toward Akron, who was standing behind Horgus. Akron barely had time to shout, "My lord," before Jared's hands closed around his throat. The boy lifted the man clean off the ground, choking him with terrifying strength. Akron understood then, it had all been a ruse. Jared's calm, his absence from the battlefield, the puppet soldiers, it was all staged to mislead them. But now that realization came far too late. Jared soared into the sky, still holding Aaron by the neck. Higher and higher he flew. The wind howled around them. And then, he let go. Akron plummeted, arms flailing. In that split second, Jared cast ice magic, hurling a deadly storm after him. Akron had to choose. Activate flight magic to survive the fall, or cast a shield to survive the spell. Either way, he would die. Akron made his choice. He shielded himself from the ice storm. A shimmering barrier formed around him mid-fall. It absorbed the worst of the blast, but Jared wasn't finished. This fight wasn't like a duel between mages. There was no honor, no rules, no pause between attacks. Jared had no intention of sparring. He was here to end it. Jared dived down after Akron, grabbed him again in midair, and dragged him toward the ground. While holding him tightly, he formed a new magic circle in the air. Only now did Akron realize, Jared intended to use his body as part of the next spell. The two of them fell together, faster and faster. Akron could feel the distance to the ground vanishing beneath them. Akron figured out Jared's intention. That's it for today's chapter. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to like, comment, and follow for more. Until next time, keep listening and stay tuned. And this has been LA. Catch you in the next one.